And then I'm going to ask all of you if you can see 5 tips for writing for an industrial audience. Awesome. All righty. Well, welcome everybody. Happy Monday and happy Halloween. I hope you guys all have great plans for today or something fun at least. So you're probably wondering, who is this chick? So I'm a woman of many obsessions. I am obsessed with words, obviously, hence why I'm teaching this course for today. And I like the complexities, especially with the English language. We have a lot of words that are spelled similarly, but they are pronounced differently and mean completely different things, which can cause a lot of problems. And then when you're entering into the technical world or the industrial space, you want to be mindful of how you're using your words and the way that you're writing them out, because it can end up being catastrophic if you're not mindful of how things are presented in word form with a technical audience. I'm also obsessed with The Office and Dwight Schrute. He is my favorite character, and I'm obsessed with continuous learning. I have both a bachelor's and a master's degree in professional and technical writing at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. And I'm definitely obsessed with my family. So I'm the youngest of 6 kids. Yes, all from the same parents. My oldest brother, Kevin, calls me the other bookend. And I have 3 kids, a daughter who is going to be 19 in December. We have another person coming in, Jennifer. I'm going to give her a few minutes. Hi, Jennifer. Let her audio sync up. But I'm obsessed with my family. So I have 3 kids, a daughter who's going to be 19, and then 2 sons. One is just turned 5 and the other will be 4 in March. And they keep me very busy. And then my husband, who I've been married to for 4 years, he's actually a police officer in Genoa, Illinois. And I'm pretty obsessed with him a little bit. And then I'm also the proud aunt of 13 nieces and nephews, 12 of them which are alive. One unfortunately passed away. And then all of the workout pictures that you see there, I love CrossFit. Some people call me crazy because yes, it is kind of a high-paced form of exercise, but it's a lot of fun. And then I'm super obsessed with trying to decorate cakes for my kids for their birthdays. So you can see a couple examples of there. And then finally, I'm obsessed with inspiring the next generation to join engineering and manufacturing. So when I'm not writing for engineering manufacturing, I'm actually out within my own community and other communities, trying to get the next generation really excited about STEM opportunities, more specifically women. And as a side note, every week I have a podcast called Meaghan Ziemba Manufacturing. So that's my shameless plug for that. Today, we're going to be talking about writing, and more specifically, writing for an industrial audience. So why B2B needs great writers, we're going to touch on that. Who your audience is, marketing goals and types of content, be curious and research, be concise and cut the jargon, have fun and tell a story, and then kind of summarize everything that we've touched on today. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is why B2B needs great writers. So writing for the industrial space can get a little bit tricky because engineers are not really the most sociable types of people. There are some that are really good at communicating their stories and why they're creating the products that they're creating. So you have 2 different spaces. You have B2C and B2B, and I work mostly with B2B. And why storytelling is really important is because when you're talking about technical information, it can get really dried out and you can lose the attention, especially when trying to bring awareness to your brand. So you want to make it fun, you want to make it energetic, you want to make it entertaining, but sometimes that can be hard mixing storytelling with technical information. So how do you make it entertaining? Well, first, one of the things you need to do is really consider who your audience is. And that's going to really help kind of determine what type of content you're creating and where you're pushing it out to your audience in the B2B space. So you want to think about your audience and then also what type of information you want to include in your text. So how do you do that? Well, you have to think about personas, and in the B2B space, they're called buyer personas. And the reason why they're called buyer personas is because manufacturers are really trying to share their content with potential customers who are going to buy into their products and services. But for the sake of this course, we're just going to call them personas because, especially with what I do, I'm not just considering who the buyers are, but I'm also considering who am I trying to provide educational material to. So that's not necessarily going to be a buyer. It could also be someone in high school who's doing a project related to STEM, or someone in college who might need some information for like a master's paper or a thesis paper. So they're not necessarily going to buy your product, but more looking in for information on some of the services you're doing or the processes that you're using. So when you think about your personas, what that's going to help you do is provide focus for your marketing efforts. It's also going to help you develop a strategy so you're attracting the right audience and delivering that content in the right places. And potentially it's supposed to help you make more revenue, because when you're being so specific and targeted, you're distributing that content to the right audience and to the right channels, and you're not hitting audiences that don't really matter or aren't really involved in your niche. So when you're that specific and you're hitting the right audiences, the whole point is converting them into leads and then hopefully into customers, and then getting them to be continued customers so you get more money out of the whole ordeal. If I'm going too fast, please let me know. I have the tendency to kind of just keep going. So feel free to ask questions too while we're going through these slides. So how you develop your buyer personas is really a 5-step process. The first thing you want to do is actually research data trends and talk to anyone involved in your sales team. So if you're a marketer working for a manufacturing company or an engineering company, you really want to talk to the people that are actually talking to the customers or the people that you're trying to sell to. And then you want to see what the trends are. This is really going to give you a sense of what topics to write about. You also want to look into some of your competitors and see what they're talking about and the content they're creating, as well as where they're distributing their content. The next thing you want to do is research industry problems, because what do people Google or search for when they go to the internet? They're looking for solutions most of the time that are going to help solve some of their problems. So whether that's, you know, if you're in the B2C place, whether that's like a certain cosmetic that's going to help, you know, not have your face break out, or if you're in a B2B place, if you need like a certain cutting tool to cut a specific material, you really want to see what some of those problems are, so that you can start getting a sense of how people are searching for certain things, especially within your niche. So for example, within C2C CNC machining, there's a lot of different elements involved in that process. One of the things that I mentioned before is cutting tools. So you want to see, okay, I have this material that's made out of like steel or aluminum. Which type of cutting tool is going to help me cut through that material more efficiently? Or what type of CNC machine is going to help me create this product at a more efficient pace? So it's things like that. Once you start getting done researching the trends and the industry problems, you then want to start interviewing your customers as well as your prospects. So you want to go to your customers and ask them, hey, you know, what sort of problems are you having? What are some of the things that you're reading? And it's not just your customers, but it's also potential customers as well too. And I've developed like a list of sample questions during these interview processes that you're going through. So you basically want to know what type of role that they have at their company if they're a buyer. What kind of company do they work for? Because if it's not a company you normally work for, you might not want to develop content around that. You want to know their level of education in certain instances. You want to know their age and their gender in certain instances, and I'll touch on why in a minute here. And then you want to, start to get a sense of where they're living. Is it in an urban area? Is it a rural environment? And all of these questions you can filter out as well too as they apply to your situation. You don't have to ask all of these. But this just gives an idea of, what sort of research you should be doing in terms of building up your content. Some of the things that I like to ask when I'm creating content for people is really, what are your biggest challenges or roadblocks? And how do you define success? And, what are some common objections that you have? And then how can we help you solve your problem? So just kind of just getting a general sense of, how their life experience is fitting into the companies that I'm writing for. And then applying that to the buyer personas that we're making. Once you get done researching your buyer, once you get done interviewing your customers and your prospects, another good point to add too is you also want to interview anyone who might have been a customer before or who might have been a prospect before, but then either stopped being a customer or didn't follow through the sales funnel. And the reason being is not everybody is perfect, and it's good to know where you're falling short as a company. And it's good to know like what reasons they had for not either buying from you or continuing to follow you as a brand, because that's only going to make your content better, is if you know where your shortcomings are as well. So be sure you're not just interviewing everybody who has something positive to say about you, but also interview somebody who might have negative feedback for you as well, because it's just going to make your content better. And it's also going to help you figure out where you need to improve. Once you get done interviewing your customers and your prospects, it's time to start constructing your personas. So a good reference to look into is HubSpot. They have a lot of really great content on how you can construct your buyer personas and what sort of information to include. They also have really helpful templates. The next slide that I'm going to show you is actually from HubSpot, but you want to make it semi-fictional characters. So not necessarily a real individual, but a fictional character that kind of encompasses several individuals that you've talked to during the interview processes. And there's a reason for that, because you just don't want to focus on like one individual, because there's going to be several people involved in groups that kind of represent a niche. So their suggestion is to give them like fictional names. For instance, this one is B2B Bob. And then you want to include things like, how they prefer to get a hold of. Do they want emails? Do they want face-to-face contacts? Do they prefer social media channels? Do they prefer text messages and phone calls? And this is really going to help you develop sort of a content strategy in terms of what type of content you're going to create. And then you want to look into, what their job responsibilities are, what their goals and their objectives are, if they're the decision maker or if someone else is making the decision, and if so, who does that report to? Some of their biggest challenges, and then, a little fun information as well too. So for instance, this template shows I want to adapt inbound marketing material, not outbound marketing material. So when you go through this whole process, it does seem a little daunting and a lot of work. But again, it's going to really help you determine what type of content you're going to be creating. And that's going to be the next thing that I dive into. So once you figure out who your personas are, you really want to start thinking about what your marketing goals are so that you can determine which type of content you're going to create and where you're going to put that content. And there's a few steps involved with that. So these are some examples of marketing goals that you can consider. So one is increase your brand awareness. Two is increase traffic to your website. So are you trying to, I'm going to take a step back because I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm sorry. But increase brand awareness, that's for anyone who might not know you exist and who you are. In the B2B space, there's a lot of companies still out there that say, well, we don't need really to work on our website because, word of mouth, everybody knows us through word of mouth. And that's fine. But in terms of the digital space, if you want people to know who you are, a lot of the competitors are already getting searched for some of these keyword phrases and keywords. So you really want to start getting involved with generating more traffic to your website and generating more search results to your website. So one of the goals would be increase brand awareness so that anyone who doesn't know about your brand or what you do, that goal is going to help get some of those new leads in so that you could potentially convert them into customers. And then you want to increase traffic to your website. If you want people to see your content on your site, you have to develop some sort of strategy for them to either, have a call to action that links them directly to your website, or filling out a form that links them to your website, or getting on a landing page that links directly to your website. The other common marketing goal is to generate more sales leads. So your website should potentially be an aid to your sales team, so that when anyone clicks on something that you're including in your content, your sales team is actually getting that information from them. And there's tools out there that you can use. The one that I'm most familiar with is HubSpot, so that allows you to set everything up and track everything. And then the fourth one is increased conversion rates, which means you're actually funneling your leads through that sales funnel and converting them into customers, and then hopefully they keep coming back and keep buying from you. And then 5, improve retention and drive upsell. So once you have a customer, really nurturing them and offering them deals and keeping them and retaining them for your brand so that they can become brand loyalists for your actual brand. So for increasing brand awareness, there's a few types of content that you can focus on specifically that's going to help you do that. There's a lot of SlideShare decks that you can create. There's co-branded content. So like if you have a partner or something who's in the same space that's providing components for your company, things like that, where you're doing case studies with them. And then funny videos. So nowadays, a lot of videos are being used to help attract attention fairly quickly. And a lot of people think, well, it's just a video. I don't really need any kind of written content to back that up. And that's not the case at all. You still need to develop some sort of storyboard for those videos, as well as some sort of script to help whoever's in the video follow along, so that you're maintaining that storytelling aspect and having a really good flow to it. The other thing is you can actually pair up other types of written content with your video content so that you have those backlinks that are connecting them together. In terms of generating traffic to your website, there's different types of blogs that you can do. You can also do social posts. So again, there's a difference between long form content and short form content, whether it's a technical article, which could be anywhere between 800 and 1,500 words, or a blog post, which could be anywhere between 300 and 500 words, or a social media post, which could be anywhere between 25 and 150 words. Twitter does 140 characters, I believe, but I think they increased that to like 160 or 180 now. So it's taking all of this information and being able to repurpose it for different goals that you have in mind for your audience. In terms of generating more sales leads, there's a bunch of different types of content like ebooks or checklists. You can also use tools and resources that are pre-designed to like provide some sort of spreadsheet. And then for converting marketing leads, you can use content like white papers or case studies And then product demonstrations are also good to convert some of those leads to actual customers. For improving retention and drive upsell, again, a blog is good for these, and also video tutorials or free exclusive ebooks and then exclusive deals. So there's a bunch of different content that you can develop depending on what your marketing goals are. And then once you figure out what types of content you want to do, you want to create a marketing strategy around those contents so that you can actually start distributing it in a manner where it's not going to just be one time and then you forget about it and move on. You actually want to have some sort of content calendar so that you're keeping track of everything and setting up any opportunities for repurposing it. So I want to stop here and see if there's any questions. I see something in the chat. I think it's 180. Thank you, Dave. Appreciate that. But I want to stop before moving on to the next slide to see if there's any questions. I don't want to keep rambling on and have anyone have a question and they forget about it when I move on. Do we have any questions right now? Going once? Going twice? No? Okay. So then the next thing you want to do after you decide who your buyer personas are, what type of content you're going to be creating to reach your marketing goals. You want to like what you're writing about and be curious and do your research. So why is liking what you're writing about really important, especially when it comes to technical information? If you don't have a passion for it yourself and you're not curious about learning about things, it's going to show through your writing. I've been through several situations where I had to actually turn down what the project was because the content just didn't interest me. And I've tried before in my own personal experience to write about stuff that didn't interest me, and it showed through my writing. So it became really boring. It was really hard to focus, and it just ended up being a bad experience. A great learning experience for me, but a bad experience because the client could tell that it wasn't 110% that I put in. So make sure that you're not only researching the subject matter to see what it's about, but also researching it to see if it's actually something that interests you and that you're curious about it. Because if you don't like what you're writing about, it definitely is 100% going to show through your writing, and then everybody's just not going to be happy at the end of the day. So then you want to research your subject material and also your competition. So let's say you're writing about additive manufacturing. My general rule for when I'm researching is to get 3 to 5 resources. You don't want to get lost in a rabbit hole, and this is point number 5 on this slide. But you want to make sure that you're giving yourself enough time to not only do the research, but also create your outline and then also create the actual text that you're writing for. So when you're researching, I usually try to give 3 to 5 good resources because it's very easy to just keep going and keep Googling something. And then, when you're looking at an article, they might have backlinks to something else. And you just keep going and going and going. And sooner than later, you notice that like 5 hours went by and you really haven't done anything. So be mindful of what resources you're looking into. And then another great resource is the subject matter experts themselves. So don't be afraid to ask questions. If you're not understanding what a certain acronym is, make sure you're getting clarification on the acronym. If you don't understand why a certain material is being used, make sure that the subject matter expert is going to explain that as well. Again, some engineers can be very withdrawn during this process. So it's really important if you're working in an industrial space to be persistent and confident in your interviewing skills, because if you just let someone answer with one word answers, it's really not going to help you in that writing process. So you have to kind of get comfortable with difficult personalities. And I don't mean difficult where they're like mean or anything. It's just that sometimes people don't like being interviewed, or if they haven't been interviewed, they might just think, oh, just giving this one word answer is enough. So you need to really get comfortable with digging for the details and asking up follow-up questions so that you're getting all of the information necessary to represent that technical information in the appropriate way. The other thing you want to look into is any keyword and keyword phrases. We're in a digital space, so there's a lot of content that's out there that you're going to be competing with. And you really want to make sure with whatever client that you have and whatever niche that they're in, that you're also including those keywords and keyword phrases so that they're showing up on that #1 page within like the top 5 or 10 search results. Because if they're not on page 1, more likely than not, their content isn't going to get read. So if you're not comfortable with that process of it all either, there are several experts out there and tools that you can use that can help you with this step. Another good thing to ask, with whatever company you're working for, is to see if they already have a list of keywords and keyword phrases that they're using themselves, and just making sure that you're sprinkling that in whatever content that you're writing. And then again, just to reiterate, don't get lost in a rabbit hole. Make sure that you're being strategic about how much time you're spending on your research, how much time you're spending in your interviews, and then how much time you're spending developing your drafts and your outline. Because again, if you don't start with these habits, it's going to get really hard staying focused and reaching those deadlines. And sometimes the deadlines are a quick turnover. So you need to make sure that depending on the type of content, how long it's going to take for each. So like, for example, with me, any time I'm writing a short blog that's 300 to 500 words, I'll normally do 3 types of resources, then 1 or 2 interviews with either 1 subject matter expert or 2 at the most. And then I'll take probably 3 hours at the most to develop the outline and a draft. If you're new to writing, it might take a little bit longer, but you want to just try to keep track of how long it takes from step 1 to your final step, because then you can start gauging a little bit more how long it's going to take for each type of content. So like with a white paper, that averages out for me anywhere between 20 and 30 hours, just depending on what the topic is and how familiar I am with it, and then how many subject matter experts are involved within the topic that I'm writing about. So for example, I wrote for a photochemical etching company. That was a brand new topic for me, so it took me a little longer to become familiar with the topic. And then the company that I was contracting for, they actually had 3 subject matter experts that they wanted their opinion on. So I took an hour with each of those 3 experts. I created an outline, I sent that for review, and then I created the first draft and then sent that out to each subject matter expert. So it's just kind of getting into the groove of like what your process is and then sticking with that. The next part is really important. You want to be concise and cut the jargon. So I'm taking a quote from The Office that Dwight Schrute said, keep it simple, stupid. Again, that's just me being obsessed with The Office and liking Dwight Schrute. Not calling anyone stupid, but sometimes less is better. And you don't want to overcomplicate the text, because again, depending on who your audience is, if you keep some of those complex words in your writing, you're going to lose some of your audience because they're not going to understand it, or they're going to get bored with it. So keep it very simple, keep it very concise. You want to make sure that you're having a layout too that's very easy to read or skim over, because engineers and manufacturers are some of the busiest people in the world that I've met. And on top of that, they're also reading a lot of their content from their mobile devices. So you want to make sure that you're using headers, subheaders. If you have the opportunity to work with a great graphic designer, make sure you're including images that have text in them. And then bullet points have been a best friend of mine since working in this space because they're easy to skim over, and they help break up the page a little bit so that it's just not one long form of giant paragraphs and text. The other thing too that a lot of people don't take in consideration when writing for the digital space is you want to kind of break up your paragraphs a little bit more as well, so that you're not having like 4 to 5 sentences in a paragraph, but maybe like 2 or 3 sentences in a paragraph, because then that helps make it more skimmable as well and easier to read on mobile devices or tablets. So when writing for the industrial space, again, you want to address the primary concerns with specific detail, and long blog posts and emails won't be read if they don't include like some sort of separation or bullet points. And then you want to focus on facts and figures. So be as specific as you possibly can. Use numbers to illustrate your point. In the industrial space, I've noticed that a lot of people like statistical information. So if you have that and it, you can include it in your story in a fun, entertaining way, definitely do that. I know a lot of people will highlight that information or emphasize it either in a form of like an infographic or a really fun meme, or some animated GIF as well too, which makes your writing a little bit more entertaining. You want to link to specific examples as well, and use case studies from your business when applicable. So a lot of people want to see how you're helping others. So case studies is a really great way to do that. And then you want to refer to any past projects or situations. Engineers specifically want to see the data that backs up your assertions. So you want to make sure that you're giving examples, linking to them, showing like, you know, what value you're providing to your customers, and being able to kind of prove that with the case studies. Excessive jargon, again, not necessary. Not everybody is going to be in the space that you're writing for. Like referencing certifications or industry standards or manufacturing processes is important, but getting highly technical when discussing key components or machinery may actually, it can connect with a certain type of audience, like engineers, I know will appreciate that information. But if I'm like a high school student or a college student and I don't necessarily know what any of those words mean, what's another way that you can write that information so that people who are outside of the industry can understand it a little bit better? And then finally, you always want to refer to the subject matter expert. So once you start writing your content and you get it in a draft form, make sure that you're setting time aside that for a subject matter expert to actually review that information, because they're going to help you fill in any gaps that you have in your writing. They'll also let you know if some of that jargon is important, or if there's another way to showcase it. I've learned working with engineers and manufacturers that there are a lot of acronyms out there. Some of them are the same, but depending on which industry you're in, it's completely different. Like it doesn't mean the same thing at all. So you want to make sure if you are including acronyms that you're spelling it out at the first mention. And if you have a longer form post and it shows up early in the text and then again later in the text, make sure you're spelling it out again, because sometimes when people read, they're not going to remember it if it's not continuously mentioned throughout the piece. And then finally, you really want to have fun and tell a story. So yes, it's technical information that you're writing about, but you're a writer. So as a writer, we should be able to tap into our creative senses and touch on the emotions of the viewers. If you're not hitting some sort of emotional string with your viewers, they're going to lose interest, especially nowadays with attention spans continuing to shorten and visual information taking over. You really want to make sure that you're using language that they can imagine something in and also connect on a human to human level. So it basically boils down to telling a story, which involves style, tone, and voice. So what does that mean? So style, tone, and voice are sometimes they get mixed up a little bit, but they actually are three separate things. Style in terms of like a brand can mean anything from what their writing looks like and then how it's laid out. So you want to make sure that if there's certain ways that they're abbreviating information, that it's consistent throughout. This also can involve like what their font type is, their font size, like how they're coloring everything. So if there's like a color theme, and just how they're representing themselves with their logos and where they're using their images. Like it can get very technical, I guess you could say, but this should already be established when working with different clients. If you're a freelancer, if you're already working with a company, they should already have a style guide. A lot of manufacturers and engineers don't, surprisingly. So this might be something you need to develop and have an internal conversation with. But it's just basically the look and feel of what your brand is. And then tone is how you're using your voice in different situations. So there's a lot of types of tones that you can use. Some of the common ones in engineering and manufacturing, the most common one used to be formal, but now there's a lot of companies who are switching to an informal type tone because they really want to connect with individuals that are outside of their normal audience. And they also want to connect with the younger generations because of everything that's going on in the sector right now in terms of workforce development. So formal and informal are the two common ones. But you can also be optimistic, pessimistic, joyful, sincere, curious, friendly, assertive, worried, encouraging, suppressed, cooperative. So there's different types of tones that your writing can take, and it's really just going to be shown through what words you're using and how you're organizing those words. One of the things that I've really started to notice is that when companies start incorporating empathy, it really makes a difference between just meeting user needs and really engaging them. So if you can show that you're empathetic towards what their needs are within your writing, more likely than not, they're going to start reading more of your content. But I also wanted to kind of give you some examples of different tones that you can use so you can get a general idea of like how you write that out. So with formal, that used to be like top one in any professional setting. And it's really common in academia as well too. And it's focused on being thorough and direct, but also respectful. So it uses words rather than contractions, and it emphasizes facts and grammatical correctness. So it doesn't say, like, you wouldn't include don't or won't or couldn't or haven't. You would actually include could not, have not, because it just gives that more formal sounding to your writing. And some examples are, according to the data, to whom it may concern. When you're writing emails, you might say, sincerely, your first and last name, or respectfully yours. Informal, that's where you can start seeing more of like the contractions in use. It can be more chatty. It has a peppier rhythm to it. So some examples are like, hey, what's up? Or cheers, when you're signing off on an email, not saying dear at the beginning of an email, but saying hi, first name, last name. I'm seeing more people cut out the last name and just include the first name because it's supposed to provide that more intimate connection when you're not using first and last name. Another one that a lot of people are using is optimistic. So you're basically conveying a sense of hope and a positive outlook for the future, even when acknowledging today's challenges. So it's really like, including words like hopeful or, hey, I hear you're having a rough day, hang in there, things like that. So there's a lot of tones that you can experiment with. And there's a lot of good resources out there that you can look at. I really like going through some of the style guides that are available. So in the United States, there's really 4 style manuals that B2B writers use. I personally use the Associated Press style book, and also the Elements of Style. And I can send some of these links to Katie and she can distribute those out. The AP style book is really well known across journalists. And when you're in the industrial space, more and more companies are actually using that journalistic style over any other style that I've seen. So it just kind of goes over, standards for usage, spelling, grammar, and punctuation, and how you're abbreviating like, states and cities and different types of information. The other style is the Chicago manual style. This is actually used by a lot of writers, editors, and publishers. So in terms of industrial writing, there is a mix between the AP style book as well as the Chicago manual style book. I've always been in a journalistic setting, so I've always referred back to the AP style book. They're pretty similar. There's not a lot of differences between the two. The other is the MLA handbook. This is more used for academia stuff. So if you're writing a white paper, you might refer to this book just because I don't know a lot of people outside of engineers themselves that are reading white papers, except for engineering students or anyone who's interested in pursuing something in engineering and manufacturing. So this can be really good for helping with some of your white papers if you're writing white papers. And then the Elements of Style is a really thin book, and it's kind of just like, straightforward guidelines. And I believe it takes a lot of its information from the AP book and the Chicago manual, but it's a really short book, and it's kind of like a combination of all of them. I think I read it in like 20 minutes. But it's stacked full of information, and it really emphasizes clarity and simplicity of proper writing. So that would be a really good resource to follow along as well, if you're looking for how to like set up some of your grammar and punctuation and abbreviations. And then the final thing that helps with your story is voice. So voice is a description of anything that's unique or distinctive about your brand. This gets confused quite a bit with tone, and a lot of contract writers, where they fail at in terms of writing for industrial companies, is they get too technical with their writing, and they miss the mark completely on the brand's tone and the brand's voice. So this is going to really take some time when you're writing your content. You really need to engulf yourself, either if you're in a marketing department for one company, or if you're a freelance writer and you're working with several companies. You really need to take time building a relationship with whoever the subject matter experts are. I get a lot of clients who come to me and they say, look, we've had some really bad luck with technical writers. Yes, they're really great at the technical information, but when it comes to our tone and our voice, they're completely missing the mark, and all of our information sounds so drawn out and boring, and it's not engaging, and it's really not attracting anyone to our company. So in order to get the voice inside of your head, you have to like build that trusting relationship, and that's going to take some time. It's not an overnight fix. So I generally try to set up quite a few introductory conversations, whether it's over the phone or through a Zoom call. My number one preference is always face to face, because then you can just get a better grasp of someone's mannerisms and their reactions. And if you take note of that stuff and keep it in your head, you'll start to hear their voice. It gets annoying sometimes, but if you start to hear your clients' voices in your head while you're writing the content down, and it does make a huge difference. I know I've gotten some crazy looks when I say that, but it really does make a difference when you're writing for industrial manufacturers to build those trusting relationships. So I try to usually in an industrial space, you have your main salesperson, you have your main marketer, you have your CEO or top decision maker, and then you have your main designer or your main engineer. So I try to have one-on-ones with all of those different people, because again, depending on who your audience is, what your marketing goal is, that's really going to determine the type of content you're going to create. So if you're, for example, if you're doing brand awareness, what you're going to do is maybe create more educational type content that teaches your audience, okay, this is who we are, these are the products that we create, these are the services that we provide, and here's why. Otherwise, if it's someone that, you know, who's been a continuing customer of yours, what they might want to know more about is like product updates or any kind of new product information. So it's going to be an ongoing relationship that you already have with that customer, but it might be from the voice of the top designer who's talking to them directly. So how does that person sound? What sort of words would they use? What sort of language would they use? Would they actually spell out the acronyms? Would they use, you know, contractions? Would they be more informal or formal? Like, it's all of these questions that you have depending on what type of content you're writing and where you're placing it as well too. Once you have your voice and your tone established, again, you're going to want to outline that information. And there's several different voices that you could be writing in. So if you're writing a white paper, it's normally in a narrative type voice. It's not coming from any specific person except for like the brand. So that would probably use more of like pronouns like they, them. You also have, or yeah, they, them. And then you also have like your author's voice. And then the narrator's voice gets kind of tricky because you have first person, second person, third person limited, third person omniscient. I haven't really seen third person at all in engineering and manufacturing. It's usually first person or second person. So if it's coming from the brand and no one in particular, there's a lot of like we as a company or us as a company. Otherwise, if it's more like directed towards a press release, then they would basically say the company name and say they as the company or this as in the company or it's as in the company. So I've seen it alternate between all of those words. But again, make sure when you're done writing everything, you're referring back to your subject matter expert. They'll be able to help guide you, you know, in the right direction of what's missing, what should be added on to. So in summary, I know I went through quite a bit of information and we're almost out of time, but you really want to figure out who your buyer personas are. Once you figure those out, you want to really research what sort of information you want to include based on your topics. Then you want to get into, okay, I have my buyer personas. I know what I'm going to be writing about. What are my marketing goals? Then what type of content you write surrounding those marketing goals, how you can repurpose some of that content. And then once you start your writing process, you really want to keep in mind, okay, what sort of tone do I want to use with this? What voice is it going to be written in? What is the style of the writing? And then finally, at the end, you really just want to make sure that you're really connected with the subject matter experts and get that draft reviewed so that they can say, yes, this sounds like us. No, here's some of the changes, or here's what you forgot, and include that in it. And yeah, that's my presentation for today. Do we have any questions? I'm trying to read. That was a ton of info. I took a lot of notes. Thank you, Katie. That was freaking awesome. Thank you, Dave. Is there any questions? I feel like no questions, but I love how you presented everything. So clear. Thank you, Whitney. Thank you so much. So informative. You're welcome. Thank you for joining me. Appreciate you. Thank you, Diane. Appreciate you as well. Well, if that's all for today, here's my contact information. You can scan that QR code. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask me personally, I did include my Calendly link there as well as my email, so feel free to reach out to me. I'm available most of the day. I usually try to get back to people within an hour or within 24 hours. My two kids actually keep me quite busy, so if I don't respond right away, it's because they're keeping me busy, but feel free to reach out and connect with me on LinkedIn. Thank you so much.